77,000 tickets, 73,946 actual human beings crammed into an NFL stadium, wildfire smoke drifting over the parking lot, Dave Chappelle and Meek Mill in a former Eagles center just hanging out, all there to watch one guy talk for 2 hours. That's not a typo, and it's not an exaggeration for the thumbnail. That's Shane Gillis, on a Friday night in July of 2026, officially breaking 2 Guinness World Records for stand-up comedy in the same show. Here's the part that should sound impossible. 7 years earlier, this exact same guy got hired for a dream job, and then lost it in 4 days, over something so ugly the company that fired him had to publicly apologize for ever hiring him in the first place. This was a network issues a statement, national story kind of canceled. Let that sink in for a second. A comedian outsold most concerts that ever happened in that building. A guy whose whole persona is confused, slightly out of shape doofus who says the wrong thing, just outdrew the Eagles' own average home crowd, doing absolutely nothing but standing on a stage and talking. Somewhere, a marketing executive is looking at those numbers and quietly rewriting an entire 5-year plan. And now he sells out football stadiums. Quick honesty check before we go further, because you're about to hear the word Austin a lot, and I want to be straight with you. The record-breaking show happened in the city where he built his comedy career, Philadelphia. But Austin is still the right city to actually understand this guy, because Austin is where he built his real comedy identity, inside the Joe Rogan podcast world. And it's also the exact scene he now spends a suspicious amount of time making fun of. This is a story about what happens when the guy the outsiders adopt outgrows them altogether and decides to fire up the grill. Let's rewind to where this actually starts. September 2019. NBC announces the new cast of Saturday Night Live, and one of the names is Shane Gillis, a big mustached comic from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, best known at that point for a podcast called Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast. Within days, old clips from that podcast start ripping around the internet. One of those clips, Gillis is riffing on a city's Chinatown neighborhood, making offensive jokes that many viewers saw as crossing the line.
NBC asked me to put out a statement, and the statement they send you is just crazy.
They wrote a statement for you.
They were like, here's what you got to say. It was inexcusable. You got to say all this stuff.
Wow.
And I was just like...
Did you write it? Did you
No,
put
my
it out?
statement was bad, though.
Damn, that's one thing about me not paying attention to anything. That shit doesn't get back to me.
I was just joking, obviously. I'd never felt like I was entitled to anything like that, but it was fun to go on podcasts and be like, St. Rogies, help, dude. We pray to St. Rogies, dude, descend and save me.
You gotta kind of just go through these things, you know.
I agree.
In the end, one of the things that you and I have been talking about is that it made you stronger. It really did, right?
Definitely.
Made your stand-up stronger.
Absolutely.
Like when people hear you, and I heard it last night, when they introduce you, and Tuesday night too.
Yeah.
People go shit house. They get nuts. They're happy you're there.
But for a while, what happens the first couple weeks, I was in New York too, so people are very uptight, and you go on stage, and then it's just in your head. Like you see people whisper to each other, and you're like, he's telling her who I am. She's gonna be everything you see,
and you see the girl's face change.
The segment resurfaces online and spreads fast, and the backlash is intensified by the timing. SNL had just announced a new cast that included an Asian American openly gay performer. The timing could not have been worse. 4 days after hiring him, SNL fired him. The show put out a statement calling the language offensive, hurtful, and unacceptable, and saying basically, we didn't catch this before we hired him. That's on us. Gillis responded publicly, said he never meant to actually hurt anyone, and that pushing boundaries is just the job description for a comedian. I'm not here to relitigate whether that firing was fair. People have been arguing about that for 7 years, and none of them are stopping because of this video. What matters for our story is the label that stuck afterward. Shane Gillis, the canceled comic. The guy who lost the biggest job in comedy before his first day on set. In one world, that makes you radioactive. In another world, it makes you a folk hero. Guess which world Shane ended up living in? Because here's what actually happened next. Gillis didn't slink off and get quiet. He went right back to doing the exact thing that got him fired. Being completely unfiltered on a podcast. Except now he had an audience that had just watched him get punished for it live. Matt and Shane's secret podcast turned into one of the biggest comedy podcasts in the country. He started popping up in the rooms that specifically prize the "we say what we want" energy. Legion of Skanks podcast in New York, Kill Tony in Austin, and eventually a rotating seat on the Joe Rogan Experience, sometimes more than once a year. This whole cluster of comedians and podcasters, Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe, and Kill Tony, Andrew Schultz, and Flagrant, is what people now casually call the Rogansphere. And a big chunk of it physically lives in one city. Rogan moved his show there. Kill Tony tapes there. Eventually, Gillis moved there too. In 2021, Gillis self-funded a special and just put it on YouTube. It was called, fittingly, Shane Gillis, Live in Austin, filmed at a club called The Creek in the Cave, and it ended up racking up tens of millions of views completely on its own. Inside this scene, that special did something huge for his reputation. It proved he didn't need a gatekeeper's blessing. The industry's biggest gatekeeper fired him, and he built an audience big enough that the gatekeeper became irrelevant. Somewhere in there, getting canceled quietly flipped from a scarlet letter into a credential. But podcasts and self-funded YouTube specials can only take a career so far. The real proof that Shane Gillis had crossed over from canceled internet guy into honest-to-God mainstream comedy star arrived in September 2023 when Netflix dropped his second special, Beautiful Dogs. 52 minutes of Gillis doing what Gillis does. A bit about touring George Washington's house, a bit about his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend being an actual Navy SEAL, and what that does to a normal man's self-esteem. A bit about getting bullied by an Australian goth, which is a sentence I did not expect to say in this script, and yet here we are. It's rowdy, it's a little chaotic, and it is not remotely interested in making everyone in the room comfortable. Critics notice something sharper going on underneath the chaos, though. One widely read take in the New York Times argued that Gillis has a very specific skill. He can hype up a crowd that wants a big, flag-waving, love it or leave it American comedy and gently mock that exact crowd in the very same breath. He'll open a set bragging about America being the greatest country on earth, ride the huge cheer, and then immediately undercut it. Shane is a guy who understands his audience well enough to tease them without ever actually losing them. Beautiful Dogs landed in Netflix's global top 10, and from there, the mainstream cosigns started stacking up fast. A Bud Light partnership, which, again, think about that for a second. A company that lives and dies on not offending anyone decided the canceled guy was exactly who they wanted holding the can. A hosting gig on Netflix's roast of Kevin Hart. emceeing the actual ESPYs in a tuxedo in front of actual professional athletes 5 years after a podcast job apologized for hiring him. He co-created and starred in his own scripted Netflix comedy, Tires. He kept his sketch show, Gillian Keeves, running the whole time on the side, basically as a hobby that 1.1 million people subscribed to. And then, in February 2024, the plot twist nobody saw coming. Saturday Night Live invited him back, not as a cast member, as the host.
It was so weird. Such a fucking corporate thing. You got in there finally.
I liked it.
What a completion of a storyline.
Yeah, it was fun.
I know, but
Yeah.
it seems like a fun night.
It is
to
a
do
fun
the
night.
sketches and fuck around
It
and
is.
the
And
party.
my family was there. The party kind of sucks when I've been to the
Yeah.
party a bunch of times and it's great.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Did it feel like a rite of passage? What did it feel like for you?
It's a cool win. It's
I
a
think
cool,
it's
a cool win for the
closing
whole
on the
city.
story.
I think it's nice for that. I mean, obviously, it just brought the story back up again.
Yeah.
But you were defended quite a
But
bit.
but
Yeah.
it was also, it's like, honestly, this was like them saying sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
that's cool.
That's what
Yeah.
it was.
Admission of guilt.
It was
Pretty much.
it was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
closest they can come to an admission of guilt.
Yes.
Which is what it was.
Lorne Michaels later said in an interview that he'd actually been angry about the original firing decision back in 2019. So the show that fired Shane Gillis in 4 days spent the next 5 years watching him become too big to ignore and then handed him the keys for a night. Tally it up. Fired from network television in 2019. Hosting that same network's flagship show by 2024. Headlining Netflix specials, hosting Netflix roasts, starring in his own Netflix series, and about to set a comedy attendance record that had literally never been touched before. Which brings us to July 17th, 2026, Lincoln Financial Field, Philadelphia. 77,000 tickets sold, 73,946 people in their seats, breathing wildfire smoke and loving every second of it. 2 Guinness World Records verified on the spot by an actual adjudicator. Largest audience ever for a comedian, and most tickets ever sold for a solo comedy show, breaking a record that had stood since 2008. Chappelle came out. Meek Mill came out. Jason Kelce introduced him, in Kelce's actual old workplace. It's the single biggest live comedy event by one comedian that has ever officially been recorded anywhere. Yes, it's a homecoming, sure. Gillis grew up a couple hours away from that stadium and has been wearing Eagles gear on podcasts for years. But zoom out for a second and look at the bigger math. Across the last 2 years alone, this guy has sold over 1 million tour tickets and set attendance records at more than 30 different venues across North America. It has now moved from underdog territory to that's just one of the biggest comedians alive territory. By this point, Gillis has gone from being a guest on JRE to a staple. He's shown up on Kill Tony often enough that his impression of a certain president has become one of the recurring bits of the entire show. He sat down with Theo Vaughn to casually talk about the actual logistics of moving to Austin, like a normal guy discussing a mortgage instead of a comedian discussing his coronation. Now here's the part of this whole saga that I actually think is the most interesting, and it's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Shane Gillis spends a real noticeable chunk of his podcast time making fun of the exact scene that built him. Go back to December 2019, barely 3 months after the SNL firing, and Gillis shows up on Andrew Schultz's Flagrant podcast for an episode that is literally, bluntly, titled Cancelled. He's already needling everyone in the room before the intro's even over. Fast forward to any given week of Matt and Shane's secret podcast, where Rogan, Hinchcliffe, or the whole Kill Tony operation comes up, and Gillis will happily clown the self-seriousness of it. The way certain guys in that scene treat the podcast studio like a sacred temple of real comedy. The way newer comics chase Rogan's approval like it's a promotion review at a normal job. The slightly cult-adjacent energy of an entire industry quietly orbiting one guy's opinion on what's funny. He's talked, half joking and half not, about how much he complains about actually living in Austin. The heat, the power outages, the whole deal.
There was a storm in Texas, and I have no power.
Okay.
And I have to be gone. I've been on the road for like a week,
they're
and I
on
was
their own
going
power grid like idiots. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And I was gonna do laundry before I left for this trip.
Right.
But everything, I have no power for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Texas blows.
I didn't know that.
Hot as So, dude, the second we
Move
ran
back, Shane. Come on. Come back.
The second we ran out of power, the house was 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
just bugs.
And it's June. That will go out in August.
Bugs came in immediately.
Yeah.
The house filled with bugs. I'm just laying in the dark. You would have liked it. I lit some candles and read a book.
In that same flat, unimpressed tone he uses to talk about getting fired from SNL.
There was 1 week when I knew I was getting SNL and no one else knew, and I was just walking around the city like, what a beautiful city of
I love
dreams,
these people.
dude. This is incredible. And then the next week I got fired and I was walking around like, I hate this place. Fucking everyone here sucks.
Like both things are equally mildly annoying weather events. It's a small joke, but it says something bigger. This is a guy who lives inside the machine, benefits enormously from the machine, and still treats the machine like it's a little ridiculous. He'll gently torch the "we're the real comedians, everybody else sold out" branding that a huge chunk of that scene runs on, including, pointedly, himself.
Every single person, like you play, and just an exaggerated version of you. Tommy, the execs, Stav is Stav.
Oh, yeah.
Stav's 100% Stav. Yeah.
He's done it on Legion of Skanks, too, sitting through an entire segment literally called Who's Most Justified Getting Cancelled, treating the whole cancellation industrial complex, his own included, like it's a slightly absurd game show category instead of a sacred wound. Nobody in that room is allowed to take themselves too seriously for more than about 90 seconds, and Gillis is usually the one enforcing that rule, even when the joke lands on him.
My favorite one was Connor's when he was talking about you when Khabib. He's like, that's an illegal knee. Shut up, Joe, you fool, yeah. Call the police. That's an illegal knee.
Listen, I have to do commentary on the rules.
No, it was, yeah.
I have to. If someone lands an illegal knee, I have to let the audience know it's illegal. I've
Pamphlet.
read about 30 kickboxers books.
Someone's
Every
like, "Dune or this?"
kickboxer book that anybody ever wrote,
And
I
then
read.
I did sit-ups, and then I kicked that guy in the head.
That would be a dumb dude's interpretation of what a world-class combat sport athlete would tell you what to do.
And that joke hits different coming from him than it would from literally anyone else. If some outside comic mocked Kill Tony or the whole Rogan ecosystem, that's just another predictable culture war jab, easy to tune out. When Shane Gillis does it, it's coming from a guy with more actual claim to that scene's success than almost anybody currently in it. It's like the more successful parent expressing disappointment. So here's what I think is actually going on, and this is genuinely my take, not just a recap. The Rogansphere needed Shane Gillis badly, for one specific reason. He's living proof of that whole ecosystem's core promise, that getting canceled by the mainstream doesn't mean you grovel your way back in, it means you build something bigger outside it, and eventually the mainstream comes to you. Every time Gillis hosts SNL or tops a Netflix chart or breaks a stadium attendance record that had stood since the Bush administration, that's a win the entire cancel culture is fake, talent always wins argument gets to point at. But watching all of this, I don't think Gillis is interested in being anyone's mascot, and honestly, I think that's the smartest move he makes. A guy who only ever hyped up the scene that saved him would get boring fast. And worse, he'd start looking like he was performing gratitude instead of actually being funny. The jokes about Austin, about the slightly cultish energy around Rogan, about comics, clout chasing their way into a Kill Tony slot, those jokes are exactly what keep him from curdling into a brand ambassador. That's the actual skill on display here. Plenty of people have recovered from cancellation, yet their careers still went nowhere. He came back funny enough and honest enough to make fun of the very people who caught him on the way down. Think about how rare that actually is. Most redemption arcs in comedy go one of two ways. Either the guy stays angry forever and turns into a full-time professional grievance machine, doing the same 5 minutes about cancel culture until the crowd starts checking their phones. Or he goes the other way completely, gets fully absorbed into whatever scene saved him, starts wearing the merch, stops being funny, becomes a walking podcast ad read with a face. Gillis somehow threaded the needle between those two outcomes. And I think that's the actual accomplishment here, more than the ticket numbers or the Guinness plaque. Not many people can get fired for saying something genuinely indefensible, spend 5 years building a new home with the exact people who caught him, and still be sharp enough and honest enough to clown that home on the way to selling out a football stadium in his. Fired in 4 days back in 2019, hosting the show that fired him 5 years later, breaking the biggest comedy attendance record in history 2 years after that, and through all of it, still perfectly willing to stand on Rogan's own turf and tell the room it's a little insane in there. That might be the most Shane Gillis outcome possible, the Rogansphere's proudest success story and its harshest mirror, running at the exact same time. You're still here, which means either you really care about this story or you're avoiding doing something important. Either way, like the video, subscribe, and comment who you want me to dig into next.